Hello everyone and welcome to AdvancePro University. Today we're going to be discussing tax and how it works within AdvancePro. So first, let's have a short high-level discussion about tax in AdvancePro. Now there's a few basic questions we need to answer in order to know how much tax is going to be applied to an order. First, we need to know if the customer or vendor is taxable at all, and if so, which tax rates or tax terms apply to this transaction. And you can set a default tax rates for all transactions with a given vendor or customer. I'll show you how to do that today. Now, next, it does look at your products, and it says, is the product eligible for tax? And it'll exclude any non-taxable items that happen to occur on the order. And then the final thing it's going to look at is your shipping taxable? So it'll go and add some tax based on your shipping rate if that's the case. So launching into the software now, we're going to go ahead. Your tax settings are all found up here at Admin and Taxes. This is where you actually configure the taxes that might apply to a given company. So you're going to see if you're working with QuickBooks, we can actually import your existing tax terms direct from QuickBooks, or you can create tax codes in AdvancePro and then match them up with QuickBooks. Something else to keep in mind is that if you're importing orders, say from a website, then you'll need to import a tax term to get those taxes to appear correctly. Now, if you're not syncing with QuickBooks or with a website, you're just using AdvancePro standalone, you can enter any taxes you need to here. So here we have our tax term, that's kind of the tax name. Then we also have a tax code, which is the abbreviation that you're going to see used on the transactions themselves. So the tax code might be something like GST, or in Europe you'll see VAT. A lot of our customers will also just use ST for sales tax, general sales tax. So then we also have a description, so this way you can actually tell a little bit more about that tax. And we have the tax rate itself, how much tax is actually being applied to the transaction or to the item that this is going to apply to. Now, taxes also have a type. So the type is going to say this applies to sales, or this is going to apply to a vendor. This whole box, this tax type and the related tax agency, the tax type is actually mostly located there as an option for Canadian QuickBooks, as that's a requirement in Canadian QuickBooks. Now, this way we can go ahead and associate a certain set of taxes for customers and a certain set of taxes for vendors. And then they'll become eligible. We can set them for our customers and vendors. Now, if you choose a particular existing tax codes, you'll see you can actually set them for all customers or for all vendors right across the board. So if you have very set specific tax rates that are universal, it's very easy to apply them across everything. Now, you can also create what's called a tax group. So this is done right here in the admin panel. Once you've created some taxes, you can use this to charge more than one tax at a time. So this can be used if you have a situation like you may have in several states where you're paying county, city, and state taxes on your sales. You can go ahead and set up each of those individual taxes, and then we can create a tax group that can then be applied to your customers who are relevant to that group of taxes. Now, in Canada, you might need to charge QST or PST. And you will see in some situations you'll have the option to enable Canadian types of taxes as well that apply to specific Canadian tax laws in certain provinces. So this feature gives you all of these options. Now, the next thing I do want to touch on is to manually assign a customer a tax so that you can give them a default tax across the board for every transaction that customer encounters. So if we head over to View Customers, we can do this from our Quick Navigation panel or from the Customers panel and come into View Customers. There we go. We can go ahead and open up an individual customer by clicking the E button for Edit. And for customers, this information is going to be found under the Payment Info tab. You'll see we can enable them as taxable, and we can give them a tax rate. So we can go ahead and choose a given tax and apply it so that this customer is going to receive this tax rate regularly. Now, The other thing that we can do, if we go ahead and close this out, is on the vendor side. We can head over to View Vendors, again through our quick navigation panel or through the vendor panel itself. We can open up a given vendor and we'll find the tax rates under additional info for vendors. So here you'll be able to assign your tax rate and mark the vendor as taxable. You can also provide a federal tax ID for that vendor. So that covers a little bit about vendors. So the next thing I'd like to do is show a product. So let's go ahead and mark whether or not a product is available for tax or not. So in a lot of different tax situations, you will have some products that are tax exempt. So we can go ahead and open up that product either in View Products or by going to the product panel and going to View Products. And you're going to find your taxation settings for the product under additional info. So you'll see their product is taxable, and we can enable that if we like. So a couple other things I'd like to note is now that we have the customer and the product, or the vendor and the product enabled for taxes, we can start to look at transactions. And there is a specific situation I'd like to talk about, and also a more general situation. So if we open up an existing order, there's two sets of options depending on whether you're working with a Canadian or European version of QuickBooks, or if you're working with a US version of QuickBooks. So you do have the option of setting individual tax lines for each item if you have multiple levels of tax, if a product is only partially tax exempt or a different tax applies. This is available within Canadian or European QuickBooks. You'll also see that for a more general version of QuickBooks, we're going to pre-populate with your chosen tax rate, and then you can choose from a drop-down if you need to choose a different tax rate. So this becomes useful if you're delivering to the same customer across state lines, for example, and it's actually the site of delivery where those taxes applies. You'll be able to choose another tax rate from your list. Okay? So that's also one way that we can go ahead and set things up for these transactions. Now, the next thing I want to touch on is just whether or not shipping is taxable. So we have this shipping line, and it can be marked as taxable or non-taxable. And that's found up in Admin, under Site Settings, under General Settings. You will see shipping is taxable. And that can be enabled so that way tax can be added to your transactions based on shipping. So I hope this clarifies some of the questions you might have had about taxes. This does conclude our brief tour of taxes in AdvancePro. So if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out on the Questions tab of your GoToWebinar panel, or feel free to email our technical support team or your AdvancePro advisor. Thank you all for watching. We're just going to hold on a few moments for questions, and then we'll be wrapping up. Oh, and we did get a question. How can I apply taxes to my B2C web service dynamically by state? So with our B2B, B2C, or sales rep web portals, we do offer either a single tax rate for all of your customers, or you can have the tax codes with the taxes dynamically by the state or province name. And you do this just by making a tax term match the state name. So this works for the two-letter state abbreviations you'll see for the US states, and also for the written state for non-US states or provinces, and then we'll assign the tax dynamically that way. For other integrations with other web services, you want to make sure tax codes appear and match between your web service like Woo or Shopify and AdvancePro and QuickBooks the whole way through to make sure that the data is properly linked through the entire system. Okay. But this does conclude our presentation today. Thank you so much for watching.